Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback or $2.99 ebook download, including my latest NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Hope everyone's having a good week. Come down with something. I don't know. It's like a touch of a respiratory thing. Hopefully, it's not friggin' COVID again. I don't want to go through that crap again. So, before we get going with this week's story, let's go to the true crime section of the New York Post, which always has a couple of good stories. An Arizona prisoner serving 16 life sentences killed 3 other inmates at a state prison in Tucson, according to officials. Ricky Wassenhar is accused of killing Saul Alvarez, Thorne Harnage, and Donald Lashley during the altercation at the Arizona State Prison. Wassenhauer was already serving 16 life sentences for his role in a prison standoff in 2024. He already had a criminal history before the standoff. Who'd have thought? He and another man were convicted of taking 2 guards hostage for 15 days at Lewis Prison Complex in Buckeye, Arizona. It was one of the largest prison hostage situations in U.S. history. Well, here's a guy who's obviously not going to get rehabilitated. He's already doing 16 life sentences, whatever that means, and he goes and kills three other prisoners. I don't quite know how he pulled that off. I'm guessing it was with a knife to kill 3 people that quickly. He's never going to get out. I would imagine what usually happens with troubled prisoners, like inmates, escape guys, the guys that keep trying to escape, or guys that have a habit of attacking staff or killing other prisoners. Usually, what happens is they will, even though they're a state inmate, a guest of the state, there's some kind of agreement with the federal government. This guy is going to go to the Supermax at ADX Florence. I can almost guarantee it, where he'll be locked up for 23 hours a day, and what do they call it? A cleaner version than hell. So good riddance. A Brooklyn pet store owner accused of kidnapping New York City pigeons and selling them as live shooting targets. A longtime Brooklyn pet store owner is coming under fire after allegations surfaced that he kidnaps pigeons from public parks and illegally sells them to hunters to be used as shooting targets. Pigeon trapping on public property is illegal and considered animal abuse, according to the New York City mayor's office. Miguel Scott, the co-owner of Broadway Pigeon and Pet Supplies in Bushwick, that's Brooklyn, has been accused of stealing pigeons for decades, according to animal rights activist Tina Pina, say that 3 times fast, who claims that her pigeon flock was ransacked this month. So there's pushback against this. This guy and his brother are claiming it's not us. We're not doing it. You have no proof. They haven't been arrested. They're just being accused by these animal rights groups who may be making a mountain out of a molehill. Maybe this guy hasn't done anything, but he's selling pigeons. They don't like it. So now they're pitching a bitch, but the guy hasn't been convicted of anything. The thing with pigeons is they are nasty. And I mean, I've told this story. I was working the Puerto Rican Day Parade over by the Plaza Hotel. And you have the handsome cab operators over there take people for rides, and a horse took a huge dump, and then the guy goes away. They don't clean it up, and a flock of pigeons from Central Park descended on this pile of crap, and within an hour it was gone. They ate it. So I find pigeons disgusting. I wouldn't shoot at them, but it's a bizarre story. Speaking of bizarre, an autopsy on a corpse that was sexually violated on a lower Manhattan subway train was unable to determine how the man died before the sickening crime. The victim was already dead when an unidentified necrophiliac had sex with his corpse at the Whitehall Street station on April 8th. His cause of death remains a mystery for now. Investigators do not believe the 2 men knew each other, sources said. Police are also looking to speak to a woman who was seen rummaging through the dead man's pocket after he became unconscious, according to police sources. There's more to the story now that the guy has been identified. I think he's 37 years old. He's been legally separated from his wife for 6 years. He was supposedly, according to his ex-wife, a good guy. So basically, this guy drops dead on a train. Somebody pulls his pants down or sticks something in his mouth and has sex with a dead body. Then there's another video of this, of a woman comes over to him and starts rifling through the guy's pockets. So New York City has basically has fallen apart when you have things like this going on the subway train. I don't know why people would take the subway. Crime in New York City is just out of control. Speaking of crime being out of control in New York City, New York State Parole Board is filled with leftist ideologues and political has-beens who rake in an astounding $190,000 a year, including one member who married a cold-blooded killer. A post-examination of 16 members of the parole board whose salaries have skyrocketed 87% since 2019, even as they freed 43 cop killers in the past 8 years, is almost as disturbing as their pro-criminal decisions. Heading the list is Tanya Agnosti. She used her clout as a staffer as the New York State Assembly Committee overseeing prisons in 2013 to engineer the parole of Thomas O'Sullivan, whose three-decade prison stint for a hired 1982 murder of a Queens drug dealer, including an escape attempt and biting off part of an inmate's nose. Agnosti fell in love and married O'Sullivan while he was in prison and successfully pressed for the parole board to free her husband. In 2017, then Governor Andrew Cuomo, who by the way is running for mayor, tapped Agnosti to serve on the board. Cuomo stacked the parole board with leftist friends who have no appreciation for the sacrifice police make, and it's just horrific and inexcusable that this parole board has released 43 convicted killers, former Governor George Pataki told the Post. Murderer David McClary, the ruthless gangbanger who assassinated rookie NYPD cop Edward Byrne in Queens in 1988 on the orders of a drug kingpin, could be the 44th cop killer freed by the board when he heads before it later this month. You can't make this up. So you got a woman who's part of the Assembly Committee. She lobbies to get this guy paroled, a murderer, a convicted murderer, and then she marries him, and now she's sitting on the parole board for $190,000 a year. The New York State Parole Board is basically a no-show job. They meet a couple of times a month, maybe every other month, and they just free people, and they're making $190,000 a year for this nonsense. They're not working. And shame on Harpo Marx, Andrew Cuomo, who's got the balls that he's going to run for mayor of New York. So New York is, I know, I'm sure there's people in the Democratic Party that listen to my podcast. Think long and hard for voting for this guy. I know Democrats tend to vote for Democrats, but this guy, Andrew Cuomo, is no good. I mean, he's spitting in New Yorkers' faces. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch calls the Bronx the absolute best place to steal a car as she rips soft on crime borough Bronx DA. Well, that's true. Speaking of no consequences, Tisch said, if you're interested in stealing a car, the absolute best place to do it is in the Bronx. Why? Because chances are good that you'll only be charged with a misdemeanor and criminal possession of stolen property and sent on your way. That's been going on for decades. Bronx District Attorney Darcel Clark, who, by the way, is also a dead ringer for former heavyweight fighter Leon Spinks, has been a frequent target of critics who contend the prosecutor is lax on crime. Data from the State Division of Criminal Justice Services in 2023 showed that Clark's office had the worst conviction and dismissal rates in nearly every major crime category in New York City over the past half-decade. Charging decisions are made with the utmost integrity, and we do not charge unless we have the evidence. We will continue to step up our efforts to address auto crimes and and hold people accountable for them. The statement also said the DA's office has a productive partnership with the NYPD's Auto Crime Division to address auto thefts that is focused on long-term investigations and auto crew thefts. What a bunch of crap. The Bronx has never taken stolen vehicles seriously. The reason they don't is they don't want to take anything to trial that they could lose. So then when they run for office, they could say, we've got a 99% conviction rate. Yeah, but you're counting in all those plea bargains for misdemeanors. They don't have the balls to take things to trial. And like I've said, they play games. They come up with their own rules. You lock up a guy driving a stolen car, and the first question, well, when was it stolen? 2 days ago. Well, how do we know he really stole the car? And how do we really know that he knew the car was stolen? Well, the ignition is punched. Yeah, we're going to charge a misdemeanor. I've locked up guys with screwdrivers, okay? Starting the car with a screwdriver the car was still hot. The car didn't even have an alarm yet, and they're charging a misdemeanor. It's just the Bronx is, if you ever seen that movie Bonfire of the Vanities, it's about as close as you can get. And I get a kick at a long-term partnership with the NYPD's Auto Crime Division. Listen, the NYPD's Auto Crime Division doesn't have a partnership with the Bronx DA's office. There was a couple of guys in my office that were foolish enough that wanted to do cases, take down a crew of cart thieves. And when you do that, you want to go up on wiretaps. So what they would do is they'd get all this evidence. They would go to the investigation section. They would sit down with the DA, and they'd never tell you no. They'd say, "Oh, this is great." They jerk you up. "This is great, and we're gonna take this thing far." Well, are we gonna get? Can we go up on a wire? I just need a little more. And there were a couple of guys on my case. It was like a con. They would keep coming back and keep bringing up. They would just wear you down until finally you would just lock up a couple of guys and the case would go absolutely nowhere. Unlike the Manhattan DA's office, which back in the day would provide wiretaps, buy money for cars, and they would hammer people. The Bronx is a joke. Also, that case that we did with the cars being stolen that went to China, we did that case with the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. And the reason we did it with the Westchester County District Attorney's Office and didn't basically get the borough of the Bronx involved with, we knew they wouldn't do anything. And when that case finally came down and there was a press release and it was on the news and everything, then you had a couple of the bureau chiefs in the Bronx District Attorney's Office that were pissed off and like called our commanding officer, called my lieutenant, like, "Why weren't we involved in this?" We're like, "Well, we were doing it with Westchester." "Yeah, but the cars came through the Bronx. We wanted to be on board." Yeah, right. Okay. So this week's story is called Tom and Jerry. And in the early 90s, I went to the 5-0 precinct after spending 3 years running around in Bronx Task Force in the South Bronx. I wind up in the 5-0, and 5-0 had a ton of old timers. So here I am, 24, 25 years old, and the 5-0 had guys like my father's age. They were like in their 40s walking around. And I always found that fascinating that here I am, a young cop, and I'm walking around working with guys that could be my father's friends. And as I've said many times, back then, young cops were seen and not heard. The old timers would not help you, didn't really want to deal with you, walk away from you. But there was these two cops, Tom and Jerry, and they were good guys. They're both Vietnam vets. Jerry worked on he was on a PT boat, patrol boat in the Mekong Delta. He was a gunner during the Vietnam War. He saw a lot of action. And Tommy was a medevac helicopter in these guys had seen a lot of action. They didn't talk about it that much. Every now and then it would come up. They would talk about it. And these guys were like the model of professionalism. Like Jerry looked like an actor, looked like Clark Gable. His uniform was always pressed. Shoes were always shined. He was the most prepared cop I ever saw. So if he had court, he would get to work early in the morning and you'd see him in the locker room going through his memo book, going over his testimony. I remember even before I got to the 5-0, I would go to traffic court. He'd have maps. And I mean, the guy just was a professional cop. Everything was by the book. I mean, he wasn't a scumbag, but everything was by the book. Took his job very seriously. And he was the only cop to this day that I saw do this. After every shift, he would take his .38 out of his holster. He would wipe it down. He had like an oily rag and then wrap the gun up and put it on the top shelf. And then when he came into work the next afternoon, would take the gun out of the oily rag. The guy just was prepared with everything. And Tommy was a little different. Tommy was more easygoing, would kid around a little bit more. But every now and then, like Tommy had that 1,000-yard stare they talk about. Like he would just sitting in a car or something and he wasn't there. You're like, "Tommy, everything all right? Huh? Yeah, I'm fine." It's not that he was out of it, but like you could just see sometimes that his mind was elsewhere. And I was in the same squad as these guys, and I enjoyed working with them and always backed you up, always answered their jobs. And when my partner would go on vacation and maybe Tom would take the day off or was on vacation, I would work with Jerry. And I learned so much from these guys because, I went from running around the South Bronx, not answering jobs, just basically headhunting and making arrests. Now I'm on the clock. Now I'm forced to be a cop. And, he showed me the right way. Everything from accidents reports, they handled domestics. Jerry never shit-canned anything. So what winds up happening is, and these guys were in their early 40s when I first got to the precinct. Within, I think, 2 or 3 years, Jerry got promoted to sergeant. And I always wondered, because Jerry just took things so seriously, and Jerry was so professional. I kind of wondered how he's going to go to a precinct now as a sergeant, and he's going to have a group of young cops. It's one thing to work with a bunch of cops. It's another thing to manage a bunch of cops in a busy precinct, because the 5-0, you had time to take your time to fill out reports and do things the right way. When you're working in a busy command in Harlem, the Bronx, or Brooklyn North, you're going from call to call to call. It's you're taking shortcuts. It just because if you don't take shortcuts, they're going to be on your ass. How come you was taking so much time at this call? Now the sergeant's answering calls. He's going to come up to you. How come I'm answering calls in your sector? Well, I was trying to do this the right way. They don't want to hear it. Everything in the NYPD is a catch-22. So I forget where Jerry went. I don't know if it was Harlem or the Bronx. And I had heard that, he kind of ruffled some feathers in the precinct, but and it's like one of those things where you hear about great athletes like Ted Williams or Wayne Gretzky. They go into coaching, and they were such great athletes. It doesn't do well when they're mentoring or coaching, because they expect everybody to be as good as they were. And I think that's kind of what happened to Jerry initially, that he went to the precinct. He expected the cops to perform at the level he did. And when they didn't, he would call them out on it, and they butted heads. But to Jerry's credit, he righted the ship. And then from what I heard, after 6 months or a year, they loved him in the precinct. Tommy, after Jerry left, became the precinct training officer, which is a bullshit job, but Tommy had his time in. Tommy had over 20 years in. So, I mean, I always bash guys that go and take the inside positions with 5 years on the job. Tommy was a Vietnam vet, fought in war, did 20 years on patrol. He wants to be the training officer, let the guy be the training officer. So what the training officer does is, before roll call a couple of times a week, or after roll call, he'll wheel in a cart with a television set back then and a VCR, and he'll pop in a tape, and it's the latest NYPD propaganda, what they expect you to do or don't do this. And guys would bitch and moan, and Tommy would laugh. He'd go, what do you want me to do? This is my job now, So Tommy, as easygoing as he was, could come unglued. And I think I've told this story before. We went to a paintball outing up in Orange County. It was in the fall. It was like October. We're running around shooting paintballs at each other and stuff. And Tommy came. Tommy showed up. Oh my God. He was like in camouflage. His face was painted. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, this guy's taking it seriously. And he was like a fish to water in the woods, just picking people off. And there was one of our sergeants, he accused him of shooting guys from out of bounds. There was some kind of discrepancy. It was nonsense, but Tommy accused the guy of cheating. And the guy, he kind of blew it off, and he was kidding around. And he was like, get out of here, Tommy. And he took the paintball gun and pretended, because I was standing right there, pretended like he was going to hit him with the butt of the gun. Tommy went wild, just started yelling and screaming, like guys were diving on him, like, you don't do that. Like, he had a flashback. It was quite obvious to everyone was there. And then finally he calmed down, and the thing kind of got shit canned. And Tommy worked a little while longer at the precinct as the training officer. And while he was there, I always remembered, because he was a medevac helicopter pilot in Nam, he was always flying, and he was going to get his commercial. He always talked about a second career as a commercial. He was going to be a pilot. I didn't know what kind of pilot, but he was always getting his flight hours in. And there were a couple of guys in the precinct that were interested in flying. He was always talking about aviation. So Tommy retires, and I move on. I go to narcotics, then I wind up back in auto crime. And in 2002, I don't know, from the time when Tommy retired in the mid-90s, I guess he went directly into flying. And on October 23rd, 2002, Tommy was piloting a Cessna 208B Cargo Master airplane. It was like an airship freight. He was carrying a bunch of legal documents. It was a prop plane. And he departed Mobile's downtown airport at 7:40 p.m. He was only up in the air a couple of minutes, and I've listened. You can go on YouTube and listen to the radio transmission. He's going back and forth with the tower. It was a clear night. The only thing in front of him was a DC-10, I think it was. It was a couple miles ahead of him. So the tower told him there's a DC-10 a couple miles ahead. He was like, okay. And everything's going fine. Then all of a sudden, Tommy comes on the radio and he starts going, I need to deviate. I need to deviate. I need to deviate. And the tower is asking him, what's going on? What's going on? That's it. No more transmissions. So Tommy's plane goes down in a swamp. And to this day, the NTSB has no answers to what happened to that plane. The plane was basically vaporized, spread out over a large marsh, which according to them indicates he struck something in the air that basically blew the plane apart. Tommy's body, or what was left of it, was recovered a couple hundred yards from the wreckage field. And the thing is, it hit a marsh. So according to the NTSB, the engine should be intact. But it wasn't. The engine was just blown to pieces. So he hit something in the air, and to this day, they don't know what it is. What parts of his plane they recovered, there were red markings on it. They sent those pieces to 2 independent labs. For the life of them, they can't figure out what the markings are on the plane. They know he struck something. According to Don Goodwin, CEO of Mid-Atlantic Flight, he said, I've never seen a report like that. It's very troubling to have something like this happen and not know what caused it. I know the family's upset. To this day, there's no answers to what happened to Tommy's plane, and it's unfortunate because he was a really good guy. He was married, he had a family, and he was doing what he loved, flying, and unfortunately, it cost him his life. Jerry, I would run into every now and then during the course of my career. And it's weird when you're going to retire from the NYPD, for me, because there's every year you've got to go to different training. You got to go to the outdoor range. You got to go to different things. And I knew every time I would go to these things, I was never going to do it again. And I was running into people that I knew I would never see again. And probably 6 months, because I retired in July, probably January of 2007 is the last time I was going to go to the outdoor range and qualify for my gun. And there's Jerry. I run into Jerry, and we're talking about Tommy, and Tommy had passed about 5 years ago. He died in 2002. And Jerry was now a lieutenant. Jerry was, Jesus, how old was Jerry? Because Jerry became a sergeant late. Jerry was in his 40s when he became a sergeant, and Jerry probably had 30 years on the job, and he became a lieutenant. And, even though he was in civilian clothes, Jerry looked like an actor. And, we were just shooting the shit and stuff. And I remember him telling me, as a lieutenant, his responsibilities and how the job has changed. And, basically the input I got from him was he felt that the job had changed and not for the better. And he really didn't understand this new group of cops that were coming up behind us. Like, they didn't take the job seriously. And I said, well, Jerry, if that's the case, you might want to think about retiring, if this isn't working out for you. And he said he would think about it, but knowing Jerry probably stayed longer than I did. He probably put in 30 something years. I hope Jerry is alive and well. He was a great guy. Rest in peace, Tommy. It's just sad, that the guy like that just would perish, and there's no answers for what happened to him. So as always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Las Vegas, Nevada, Hobart, Indiana, San Leonardo, California, Loveland, Ohio, Elmont, New York, and County Sligo of Ireland. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram @VicFerrari50. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. I would appreciate it. And if you enjoy the content of this podcast, please check out my Amazon author page. Just type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free, including NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Thanks a lot, everybody. I really appreciate the support, and I'll have another episode out next week.